What happened next was not loud, not dramatic, and not wrapped in a perfectly timed announcement, yet it landed with more force than any press conference ever could. Because when Esther Yu and he finally stopped hiding behind carefully chosen words and perfectly measured distance, the internet did what it always does when truth arrives quietly but undeniably. It erupted. Timelines refreshing endlessly as disbelief gave way to stunned excitement, because this was not a rumor breaking, not a leak escaping, not a blurry photo sparking debate, but a moment unfolding in plain sight where intention replaced speculation, and for years fans had trained themselves to read between lines, to collect fragments of glances, pauses, and strangely aligned schedules. To notice how questions were answered without answers and how names were avoided yet somehow present in every conversation. But this time there was no familiar escape route for denial, no convenient excuse of promotion or coincidence. Because the atmosphere itself changed, beginning with a public appearance that should have passed unnoticed, a routine schedule under bright lights where smiles are usually rehearsed and proximity is carefully calculated. Yet from the first second something felt different. The space between them was gone, not erased by accident but ignored entirely, as if it no longer mattered, and when Esther Yu spoke her voice carried a softness that did not perform for cameras, a vulnerability that did not ask for approval, as she thanked someone who had stayed beside her through her hardest moments, someone who understood her emotions without demanding explanations and protected her peace instead of controlling her narrative, and though she never said a name, the room already knew, because he did not react like a co-star following a script. He smiled the way people do when they are seen, a real smile that reaches the eyes before the lips, the kind that cannot be rehearsed, and when he spoke, moments later his words landed with stunning clarity, saying that some feelings do not need to be explained for years because when the time is right they explain themselves, that honesty matters more than fear, and that protecting someone does not always mean hiding forever, and with that the silence became louder than any confession, because they did not label it, did not define it, did not turn it into a headline-friendly sentence. Yet somehow everything was understood, and within minutes, clips spread untouched and unedited, comment sections collapsed under emotional overload, and disbelief transformed into collective realization as fans revisited every moment they had once been told was imagined. Suddenly seeing patterns where they had always existed, late-night overlaps, matching details, the way Esther Yu's tone shifted when his name appeared, the way he always seemed attuned to her mood before anyone else. Interviews resurfaced where she spoke of wanting something calm and safe rather than dramatic, and where he admired emotional bravery paired with private fragility, words that once floated unnoticed now reading like confessions patiently waiting for the right time. And what shook people most was not just the admission itself, but the calm surrounding it. No frantic denials, no agencies rushing to clean the narrative, no damage control statements, just a quiet pause that felt deliberate and strangely peaceful, while media outlets rushed to label it shocking and explosive. Fan communities reacted with something closer to relief, years of being dismissed finally replaced by validation, some crying, some laughing, some sitting in silence as the weight of the moment settled. Not because of anger, but because it felt like closure to a long emotional journey, and even among fans who struggled there was a sense of respect, because nothing about this felt careless or opportunistic. Esther Yu appeared lighter afterward, still bright but grounded, while you stayed close without claiming space, protective without announcement, and as insiders quietly hinted at a long, cautious path marked by distance and boundaries chosen to protect something real before making it public. Fans understood why this moment arrived the way it did, with no attached project, no brand deal, no obvious benefit beyond honesty, making it feel rare in an industry where relationships are often currency. And although there remains no formal agency statement or written confirmation using official labels, the truth now rests in words spoken, expression shared, and understanding reached, which for many fans is more than enough, because from this point forward the guessing is over, the lens has changed. And what remains is respect for something clearly real, shared just enough to be understood, and sometimes understanding matters more than details, yet what unfolded afterward only deepened that feeling, because the hours following the moment revealed just how deeply it resonated, with social platforms filling not only with shock but with reflection, long threads written by fans recounting how they had followed the story without realizing they were waiting for it to end, edits not fueled by frenzy, but by tenderness. Slow-motion clips set to quiet music, comments asking others to be gentle, to remember that behind the screens were two people who had chosen honesty over comfort, and that shift in tone was perhaps the most telling sign of all, because fandoms accustomed to chasing proof suddenly moved into a space of guardianship, pushing back against invasive questions, reminding one another that what had been shared was enough, and that anything more should come only if freely given. And industry watchers took notice of this unusual response, pointing out how rare it is for a celebrity relationship moment to cool speculation rather than ignite it, how this single exchange of words had effectively closed more doors than it opened. Because there was nothing left to decode, no hidden message to uncover, only a reality that now existed openly, even if quietly, and that quiet confidence stood in stark contrast to the usual chaos of public romance, where declarations are often followed by backtracking and explanations. Yet here there was none of that, just continuity, the next appearances unfolding with the same calm, the same unforced closeness, the same ease that suggested nothing had changed except the audience's awareness, and fans began to notice details that felt newly meaningful not because they proved anything but because they no longer needed to, the way Esther laughed more freely, the way his presence felt steady rather than performative, how their interactions carried no sense of demonstration, only familiarity, and some industry insiders quietly commented that this was what a relationship looks like when it has already survived its most difficult stages before being seen, when uncertainty and distance have been navigated privately rather than publicly, allowing what remains to be strong enough to withstand attention, and that idea resonated deeply, especially in a space where so many relationships feel rushed into the spotlight before they are ready. And it reframed the narrative entirely, shifting it away from scandal or revelation and toward timing, patience, and emotional maturity, and fans who revisited older interviews now heard different meanings not because the words had changed but because the context had, statements once dismissed as vague suddenly aligning into a coherent emotional map, revealing how often both had spoken about safety, peace, and understanding rather than excitement or passion, as if quietly describing something already present in their lives, and it became clear that this was never about secrecy for secrecy's sake, but about preserving something fragile long enough for it to become stable, a choice that now felt vindicated by how grounded the reveal appeared. And while critics inevitably questioned whether the moment was intentional or accidental, those arguments quickly lost momentum because intention was already evident in what followed, in the absence of denial, in the lack of clarification, in the refusal to reshape the narrative into something more marketable, and that refusal itself became a statement, one that suggested a boundary firmly set and quietly enforced, and as days passed the conversation matured, shifting from shock to acceptance, from curiosity to respect, and that progression mattered because it demonstrated that audiences are capable of adapting when given honesty instead of manipulation, and perhaps that is why this moment has lingered longer than most. Because it did not demand attention, it earned it. It did not shout for belief. It allowed belief to arrive naturally, and in doing so it reminded many why these stories matter in the first place, not because of fantasy or projection, but because they reflect something deeply human, the courage it takes to be seen, the relief that comes with no longer hiding, and the quiet power of choosing truth at the right moment rather than the loudest one. And as the dust continues to settle, one thing remains undeniable. This was not just a confirmation or a reveal, it was a recalibration, a moment that changed how fans view not only Esther and he, but the idea of celebrity relationships themselves, proving that sometimes the most impactful admissions are not the ones announced, but the ones simply allowed to exist, and that is why this story continues to resonate, why it refuses to fade into the endless cycle of trending topics, because it offered something rare, a sense of closure without finality, understanding without exposure, and authenticity without spectacle. So thank you for staying with us through this deep dive and being part of a conversation that values nuance over noise. If you want more thoughtful updates, emotional context, and real-time entertainment stories that go beyond the surface, don't forget to subscribe to 24H News, TM, and share your thoughts, feelings, and interpretations in the comments below. Because this is one story where every perspective adds another layer to what has already become a defining moment.